After a century of instability, Brazil emerged into the new millennium as one of the fastest growing economies in the Western Hemisphere. With an average growth rate of 4% a year, the Brazilian economy became the big success story of South America. But in 2014, this growth suddenly stopped. Brazil entered a recession, one which it still hasn't recovered from. Many began to believe that Brazil had fallen into the so-called middle-income trap. Is Brazil's recent misfortune irreversible, or can the nation restart its economic growth? This, and more, will be discussed in this report on Brazil's geopolitics. I will analyze Brazil's geopolitics by assigning it a score from F to S in 8 categories. At the end of this episode, I will take the average of these scores to rank Brazil's geopolitical status. Let's start with the first category, Geographic Security. Brazil's geography is both the country's main strength and main weakness. To Brazil's east is the Atlantic Ocean. With no land in thousands of miles, this border is completely secured. This coastal border continues until around the area of the Amazon River Delta, where the Amazon rainforest begins. North of this delta is Brazil's border with French Guiana, Suriname, and Guyana. The Amazon rainforest insulates Brazil from these nations, securing this border. The rainforest continues further west into the nations of Venezuela, Colombia, and Peru. It has the same function in these areas as well, adding a desolate buffer zone between Brazil's periphery and its core. The rainforest peters out around the nation of Bolivia, giving way to plains. This plains area forms Brazil's border with Bolivia and Paraguay, creating another buffer zone between Brazil's population areas and its border. Further south is Brazil's border with Argentina and Uruguay. Historically, this was Brazil's most geopolitically active border, with the majority of Brazil's wars being fought in this area. However, in modern times, this border is mostly secure due to the protection of Brazil's southeastern highlands. In general, Brazil's geography is incredibly treacherous and a nightmare for any invading force to contend with. While this treacherous terrain insulates Brazil from external threats, it has the downside of weakening Brazil's internal unity. Brazil's main resource areas are in the interior, while its main population centers are along the coast. As these regions are separated by Brazil's coastal highlands, it is difficult to facilitate economic activity between them without high amounts of capital investment. I'll go more into detail on why this is a significant issue in the economic stability section. Though Brazil's geographic security is otherwise solid, the nation's internal issues with its geography prevents the nation from earning a higher mark. As such, Brazil scores a B for this category. In contrast, Brazil's government stability leaves a lot to be desired. From the start of its history as an independent state, the nation has been under mostly authoritarian rule. Its 20th century history saw coup after coup. But unlike other South American nations that face similar turmoil, Brazil's transition to democracy in the late 20th century never fully materialized. Corruption is rife on all levels of the Brazilian government. The true extent of corruption became apparent in 2014 during the Operation Car Wash scandal, when it was revealed that many officials at Brazil's state oil company, Petrobras, were taking bribes from construction companies in exchange for awarding contracts at inflated prices. At first it seemed that only Petrobras officials were culprit, but after further investigation, the scheme was revealed to involve Brazilian politicians at the highest levels of government, including former Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Though he had left office in 2010, Lula attempted to run another presidential campaign in 2018, becoming the nominee of the Brazilian Workers' Party. At this point, he had already been convicted of his corruption charges, but he was still attempting to appeal. He continued to run his campaign while in prison, until Brazil's Supreme Court ruled that his candidacy was unconstitutional. The replacement candidate from his party ultimately lost to Brazil's current president, Jair Bolsonaro. Until Brazil roots out its corruption, its government cannot be stable. Considering this, along with Brazil's long history of military coups, Brazil receives a score of D for its government stability. Brazil's economic stability isn't much better. The economy started to stagnate in 2011, and the country has been in an official recession since 2014. With no navigable rivers or protected coastal waterway, Brazil has minimal natural means of transporting goods. This means that the nation has to rely entirely on infrastructure to connect economic activity. This problem is exacerbated by Brazil's natural resources being located away from the coast, where most of its population and economic centers are. This problem is bad enough on its own, but it's made even worse by Brazil's coastal geography. With sheer cliffs making up all of Brazil's eastern coast, it is near impossible to build reliable infrastructure between Brazil's coastal cities and its interior. All of these issues in Brazil's economy are made worse by the nation's high levels of corruption. Brazil ranks in 124th place in the Ease of Doing Business Index and 140th in the Economic Freedom Index. Brazil has many economic issues, and its high levels of corruption makes it even more difficult to resolve them. Considering all these aspects of Brazil's economy, the nation earns a score of D for economic stability. Brazil's demographics are exceedingly mediocre for a Latin American country. The country's demographic pyramid is somewhat top-heavy, with 38% of the population being younger than 25, and 44% of the population being between 25 and 55. This imbalance is projected to worsen as Brazil has an annual population growth rate of only 0.71%, one of the lowest in the world. To fix its demographics, Brazil should look to increase its immigration rate, which currently sits at negative 0.1 net migrants per 1,000. This decreasing population growth is part of the reason why Brazil has fallen into the middle income trap. Still, Brazil's demographic slump is far from irreversible, so the country earns a score of C for its demographics. Brazil is a very unique country when it comes to social stability. The country's ethnic demographics are very comparable to that of America. Brazil has a population that is incredibly diverse. Like America, Brazil's ethnic groups are spread wide throughout the country, with few areas that have a concentration of a single ethnic group. As such, there are very minimal concerns of breakaway regions in Brazil. If separatism was the only factor of social stability, Brazil would score very well. However, Brazil's society has many other issues which threaten its stability. Brazil has one of the highest crime rates in the world. The country has the most homicides per year, most of which is gang-related. Wealth inequality is also at extreme levels in Brazil. Again, all of this is made worse by the high levels of corruption in the nation, making any social change very difficult. Despite all of these negatives, Brazil earns a C for its social stability. These issues do not threaten Brazil's existence as a unified state, but could worsen if not addressed. Brazil's food independence is its main strength. With a food export-to-import ratio of 12-1, securing food supply chains is the least of Brazil's geopolitical concerns. Brazil is the largest producer of soybeans, third largest producer of corn, 10th largest producer of rice, and largest producer of livestock. Brazil is undoubtedly one of the most food-independent nations in the world. Despite these strengths, there are a few weaknesses to Brazil's food production that should be addressed. Most of Brazil's farmland is tropical, meaning that Brazilian farmers have to spend significantly more on fertilizer and pesticides. This issue is compounded by the lack of natural means of transportation in Brazil's food production areas. All of these factors mean that agricultural production in Brazil is very costly, However, this is an economic issue, not a food security one. Brazil will never have to concern itself with securing food imports, so the nation scores an S for this category. Brazil also scores well for its energy security. The nation is the world's 10th largest producer of crude. It exports 736,000 barrels per day and imports 297,000 barrels per day, making the nation petroleum independent. However, Brazil does not possess a lot of natural gas. The nation imports 10 billion cubic meters a year to help satisfy 17% of its electricity production. But this isn't a critical weakness, as the rest of Brazil's energy comes from renewable sources, 64% of which is from hydroelectric plants. This energy profile provides Brazil with a crucial geopolitical advantage. As such, Brazil earns a score of A for its energy independence. Finishing off with military power, Brazil does a satisfactory job. The nation has the largest military in South America and has not faced an invasion since the Paraguayan War in 1865. However, Brazil lacks the capability to project its power beyond its immediate borders. While its navy is sizable, it mostly consists of green water vessels. As such, Brazil earns a score of B for military power. Brazil is a nation with both extreme weaknesses and strengths. To summarize, Brazil received these scores for each category. When Brazil's report card is averaged out, the nation scores in between B and C. I've decided to give the nation an overall score of B, due to its strong inherent strengths, namely its food and energy security. This concludes my report on Brazil's geopolitics. If you enjoyed the video and would like to see more geopolitical profiles of various nations, be sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching.